Ukraine has just clipped Russia's and Iran's wings. Not with some massive billion-dollar weapon. They did it with something so small, they literally nicknamed it the Bullet. For years, Russia has leaned heavily on Shahed drones, using cheap swarms to overwhelm defenses. More recently, Iran has taken that same playbook into the Gulf, targeting ships, infrastructure, and key economic lifelines. The result has been chaos at every level, because how do you stop something that's cheap, fast, and coming in waves? Well, Ukraine may have just answered that. Instead of trying to outspend the threat, they flipped the entire equation. They built something even cheaper, faster, and designed specifically to hunt those drones down. Later, we'll expose how the Bullet has cost Iran not just millions of dollars in the Gulf, but also its credibility. But first, let's start with the problem Iran created, because everything flows from here. The Shahed drone that has been a nightmare in the Gulf isn't some advanced high-tech marvel. It's purposefully simple, as you'll soon see. It's a slow, low-flying, loitering munition. You can think of it as like a small airplane packed with explosives. Cheap ones. We're talking thousands of cheap drones sent in swarms against the enemy. Each drone costs somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000. And when you launch enough of them, suddenly the defender is not fighting a battle. They're solving a math problem. And spoiler alert, it's a bad one. We've already seen how this plays out. In Ukraine, Russian forces have used Iranian-designed Shaheds almost every night, in what has become a crystal-clear pattern. The drones come in waves, often in the dark, forcing defenses to stay alert for hours. Even if most get shot down, a few slipping through is enough to cause real damage. So Ukrainian soldiers are forced to be on high alert. This not only wears down their defenses and expensive missiles, but it also takes a psychological toll on the defenders. Now take that same idea and place it all over the Gulf, but just widen the scope of targets. Now we're talking oil facilities, shipping lanes, and narrow choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. Suddenly, even a small number of successful hits can cause major damage and ripple across the global economy. And that is where the real power of this strategy shows up. Iran does not need perfect accuracy. They just need enough drones to get through. Every successful hit adds pressure, while every interception costs the defender money. And that brings us to the real trick behind all of this. Every time a defender fires a high-end missile to stop one of these drones, Iran is already winning the exchange. It's not about who hits the target. It's about who spends more doing it. At the risk of being too simple, think of it like trying to swat a swarm of mosquitoes with a bullet. Sure, you might hit a few, but ultimately you are burning through resources much faster than that swarm is. That imbalance right there creates a serious problem, because modern air defenses were never designed for this kind of fight. I mean, you have systems like the Patriot, NASAMS, or Iris-T. These are some of the most advanced air defense systems in the world. But they are built to stop fighter jets and cruise missiles and high-value threats moving at high speed. But against a slow, cheap drone, they're overkill. You are simply using something that costs hundreds of thousands, sometimes over $1 million per shot, to destroy something that costs a fraction of that. Yes, it works, but it is not financially viable over time. And that is where the pressure builds. Ukraine felt this pressure early on in the war. They are dealing with these attacks night after night, and it became clear that relying solely on expensive interceptors would not work in the long term. This is the same reality that the Gulf is now facing. Even with deep pockets, the math still catches up with you if the attacks keep coming. So the question changed. Instead of asking for more expensive missiles, Ukraine asked a smarter question. How do you fight cheap with something even cheaper? That is where things start to shift. Enter the Bullet.
If you want to stay safe from drones in the Gulf, something like this might help.
This is a small, fast interceptor drone developed by a Ukrainian company called General Chereshnya. It was built for one job and one job only: to hunt down drones like the Shahed and destroy them in midair. It uses cameras to guide itself. It can ram the target or explode close enough to take it out. There's no need for heavy systems or complex launch setups. It is focused, simple, and direct. How it works is that ground operators get an early heads up from radar or spotters, then they can hand the target off to the Bullet in seconds. The drone races forward with its optoelectronic camera scanning up to 600 meters ahead. Once it spots the Shahed, the camera locks on and the operator, or the drone's own growing computer vision software, steers it straight in for the kill. That quick radar-to-camera handoff means the Bullet can launch fast and finish the job even when waves come at night or in bad weather. No giant radar dish or million-dollar missiles required. Just a small team, a simple launcher, and a drone built to hunt exactly what it was designed for. And that simplicity is the whole idea. Nothing about this design is random. It all comes back to keeping costs low, building fast, and scaling without friction. That is why 3D printed parts are used whenever possible, and why the production lines are set up to expand quickly instead of slowing down as demand grows. Every choice about its creation, maintenance, and utilization feeds into the same objective. And that objective becomes clear when you look at the target. Shahed drones usually cruise between 220 to 250 kilometers per hour, so the Bullet is built with that exact flight profile in mind. It is designed to meet them where they are, not chase some unrealistic benchmark. But once it gets there, it doesn't just match them. That is where it starts to pull ahead. The Bullet can push around 310 kilometers per hour, which changes the dynamic completely. Instead of struggling to catch up, it closes the distance fast and puts itself in position to strike before the target has time to react. But the real shock is the price. Each unit comes in at around $2,100. And that's where everything starts to change. Ukraine didn't try to outspend Iran, instead they flipped the entire equation. Rather than pouring more money into defense, they found a way to spend less and still win. What used to be a losing numbers game suddenly works in their favor. Now the defender is no longer firing expensive missiles at cheap drones, they're using something that actually costs less than the target itself. Now that might sound like a small shift at first, but once you follow the logic, it changes the whole battlefield. The economics of war start working in the defender's favor instead of against them. And this isn't just an idea on paper, it's playing out in real time. Ukraine has turned into the most intense testing ground for drone warfare anywhere in the world. Every night brings new attacks, quick adjustments, and hard lessons. These systems aren't sitting in labs or being tested in controlled settings. They are in the field, being used by real operators under constant pressure. And that pressure is producing very impressive results. In some areas, interceptor drones like the Bullet are responsible for most of the Shahed kills. Reports suggest figures as high as 70% in certain sectors. That's not just an improvement, it's a complete shift in how air defense is being handled. And they didn't stop once the system worked. In fact, that's when things really picked up. Engineers kept refining every part of it, tightening the system step by step. Cameras became sharper, guidance more stable, and the link between radar, ground observers, and operators much stronger. Each improvement wasn't random. It all fed into the same chain. Detect early, launch fast, and close the distance before the drone gets anywhere near its target. As those pieces came together, the system naturally became more versatile. It could now operate at night, defend crowded cities, and deal with waves of incoming drones instead of just one at a time. And once you reach that level of reliability, the conversation changes. This is no longer something being tested. It's something being used under real pressure with real consequences. And that's exactly why what's happening now carries so much weight. By March of 2026, the same kind of drone threat had spread into the Gulf, and the pattern was already familiar. Iranian drones began hitting critical targets across the region, and each strike added a new layer of pressure. In Bahrain, the Bapco refinery was hit hard enough to force a shutdown. In Dubai, a drone strike set a fuel tank ablaze at the international airport, briefly halting operations. Kuwait saw attacks on US bases, while out at sea, merchant ships were damaged, some abandoned after fires or structural failure. All those incidents stacked up. The human cost followed, with seafarers lost and port workers injured. Once you zoom out, the real pressure point becomes clear. Everything runs through the Strait of Hormuz, so any disruption there doesn't stay local for long. It spreads outward almost immediately. That's why the reaction is so fast. Oil prices start moving, shipping costs climb, and insurance premiums rise. From there, the impact keeps flowing through the system. Fuel becomes more expensive, goods cost more to transport, and before long, people far from the region start feeling the effects in everyday life. And that brings Ukraine back into the story in a very direct way. They are not sitting this out or watching from a distance.
But we understand that this war is spreading across the world, and that Iran is an ally of Russia. So I think we could find the resources to send our instructors to train people who are fighting the same enemy.
More than 200 Ukrainian specialists are now on the ground across Gulf countries, like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait. They're training local forces, helping build out real operational systems, and in some cases stepping in to assist with live interceptions, using the same low-cost drones that proved themselves in Ukraine. As that support settles in, the early results are starting to show. There are already reports of successful interceptions, and more importantly, key sites are holding even under repeated waves of attacks. At the same time, production of these interceptor drones is scaling up, with plans to reach tens of thousands of units. That combination of proven performance and growing supply is starting to shift the balance, and it's all happening live. This isn't a controlled environment or a limited trial. It's unfolding in real time, under constant pressure, which is why each interception carries weight. Every drone taken down reduces the chance of a wider disruption, and every low-cost defense stops what could have turned into a much more expensive chain reaction across the global economy. Now, take a step back, because this is where the picture really starts to come together. Ukraine is no longer just a country asking for help. It's become one that provides it. And what it's offering goes far beyond hardware. It's exporting experience, the kind that only comes from being under constant pressure and having to adapt fast. That matters because these systems aren't being built in theory. They're being tested night after night against real threats. The tactics behind them weren't written in a classroom. They were shaped in combat, adjusted in real time, and proven when it counted. That gives Ukraine real weight as a partner, especially for countries now facing the same kind of drone attacks. And as that reality sinks in, the demand starts to rise. More countries are beginning to see the gap. Traditional air defense systems still matter, but on their own, they struggle against fast, cheap drone swarms. What's needed is something that can scale quickly, stay affordable, and keep up with the pace of these attacks. What started as a way for Ukraine to survive is now turning into a full industry. And as that industry grows, it is doing more than just producing drones. It's shaping how countries think about defense, how they prepare for future conflicts, or who they turn to when the pressure starts to build. As for Iran, Russia, and any other nation using Shahed drones, well, for now, the jig is up. The swarm advantage has been lost. The cost advantage has been lost. And the element of surprise has been nullified. Sure, Iran can still adapt, they can build faster drones, they can try to jam signals or improve guidance, but every upgrade pushes the cost higher, and the system becomes more complicated. That is the trade-off. So, let's tie it all together now. Simply put, Iran built a strategy on cheap swarms that overwhelmed traditional expensive defenses. Ukraine, under relentless pressure, answered with something simpler, faster, and far cheaper: the bullet. That solution is now deployed beyond Ukraine's borders, protecting critical global energy routes in real time. The economics of drone warfare are shifting right in front of us. Wars aren't always won by the biggest budgets. They're often decided by who figures out the smarter economics. And right now, that balance is tipping. What began as a desperate necessity on Ukrainian battlefields is now safeguarding the world's energy supply. For the first time, Iran's cheap drone war is being beaten at its own game.